Hello all and welcome. We will begin today's history on the edge, and the edge metaphor might be quite fitting today since we are speaking, or we will be speaking about what lies at the edge of the internet and the darkest parts of the web. We'll be talking about fringe topics, more specifically misogynistic, extremist online discourse. And while these ideas do appear on the fringes and at the edges of the web, they're slowly becoming even more integrated in mainstream discourse, especially with the latest media production, which has brought those themes into more of a spotlight. But we might raise the point that those themes are not being competently discussed, and this brings in experts who study this phenomenon. So this brings us to the topic of today's presentation and broader discussion, which is misogyny on the internet. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce today's speaker, Selenia Anastasi. She is a digital humanities PhD candidate at the University of Geneva, and she is currently wrapping up her doctoral thesis on extremist online discourse, on which she based today's talk. At the same time, she is also a research fellow at the University of Rome La Sapienza, working on political incivility using mixed methods. Before pursuing a PhD, she studied at the University of Catania, her hometown in Sicily, where she obtained a master's degree in digital humanities. In casual conversation, she might define herself as a proud Sicilian, which is applicable, and knowing the Italian context, it's quite difficult to stay in academia, to fight in academia, especially as a woman, and especially as a woman from the south. So her PhD journey first brought her to the north of Italy, to Genova, but given the sheer complexity of her topic, she needed also some support from abroad and from other institutions. She is a research fellow at the Language Technology Group in Hamburg. She collaborated with the University of Torino and had a very fruitful partnership with Professor Federica Formato from the University of Brighton. In the meantime, she has published papers related to her work, presented at some of the most important conferences in her field, and currently she is in her final 2 weeks of her visiting in Ljubljana, where she is finalizing her dissertation and at the same time developing her application for a potential future collaboration for a Marie Curie Fellowship. Today, we're having a sneak peek into the results of her analysis. It's, I think, the first official sneak peek into the results of her PhD topic. And with this, I'll give the floor to my dear friend and colleague, Selenia Anastasi, please.
Thank you very much for your very broad and gentle presentation. And I'm really glad to have this opportunity because it is the first time that I have the opportunity to show you my results. And of course I'm nervous because there are also my parents here in the room. So, okay, but I won't waste much time. So the topic of today, for those who are not actually familiar with this, is the manosphere, broadly speaking, and the incel community in particular, which is the topic, the subject of my research. So briefly, just to give you some insights into this topic, because it's becoming mainstream, but it's still some niche in the academic domain. So the manosphere is considered an ecosystem of different groups. They all share the same belief in the so-called red pill ideology, which is a metaphor borrowed from the famous movie Matrix. So inside this broad manosphere, which is a very toxic ecosystem of different groups that basically express their political, let's say, male rights oriented and anti-feminist oriented ideology in very different way, we can find also the incels, which is considered the most toxic of this community. Incel is a portmanteau for involuntary celibate, because basically members of this group believe that they are not able to find a sexual partner, a sexual relationship, an intimate relationship with others. And basically the way they aggregate is based on the fact that they express this hate, this blame toward people that they considered to be the reason for this condition of, let's say, loneliness. So the point is that when I started this journey, like my PhD journey, my first concern was, how can we study misogyny in a cross-cultural way, in a transnational ecosystem, and how can we find data that are not already moderated, that are not already filtered. So where I can find online a space where I can observe people having actual conversation in a very toxic way. So I found that the incel community would be a very nice case study to answer this broad main question. But the problem is that usually misogyny online, and especially the incel community, is studied mostly in English. I was interested in to find resources that goes beyond the Anglophone sphere. So I needed to find resources also in other languages, especially in Italian. So, and this is a very good starting point, because actually these communities are very scattered all over the web. At the very beginning of their formation, they were based on Reddit, and most of the conversation were, of course, in English, and that's why there is a lot of literature about discourses of incels in English. But after Reddit shut down this group, they basically moved into so-called fringe platforms, and they create their own group, mostly based on language, so on local base. And I thought that it was also interesting to try to see how this ideology circulates and how this ideology is appropriated from people in other countries. Because, of course, in discourses, the culture is also really important. The context is also really important, can affect the way people talk and the way people actually develop their own narration and their own ideology. So how can we effectively study misogynistic transnational groups and the circulation of the red pill set of beliefs? This was the second research question. And of course, given that I am a scholar mostly interested into corpus linguistics and digital humanities, to me, data are also really important. And the way I started to think about possible linguistic resource from this group was to develop a corpus, a comparable corpus that I could collect from these different sources. And this is the first result of my research. So the creation of very huge, you will see in the next slide, a very huge data set from the main, from the principal Italian and Anglophone groups. Of course, when you deal with comparable corpora, there are plenty of epistemological consideration that you have to take into account. because it's not just the translation of a text from a language to another, but you have to satisfy a number of, characteristics. So you have to satisfy a number of prerequisites for a corpora to be considered comparable. So you have to check for gene, domain, same period of time, same participants or communities, same format, same style, same content and topic. And of course, this is really all this, you cannot check manually all of this. You have, and of course you cannot have this knowledge a priori without having a look at the content. These forums are really huge, so it's really complicated to go through all the contents manually, like just reading what's inside this. So also because the Italian manosphere look like this. So there are plenty of fora, there are plenty of communities that not always share, as I said before, the same belief. So they are all connected to anti-feminism and misogyny, but in a very different way. So what I did at the first time was to basically explore in an ethnographic way all this space to try to find the most significant of these fora, and especially a forum that I could actually compare to the main Anglophone community. And this was done according to a number of criteria based on this wall methodology, ethnography. As you can see today, I want to just to give you an idea of how I studied this community, especially from a methodological side, because it's not common and it's very complicated to study discursive phenomena in a cross-cultural and in a cross-linguistic way. So I had to develop a number of strategies to do this in a proper way. So first, I checked, like just reading and accessing this fora, if I could compare this fora from this different level. So membership criteria, access protocols, privacy control, normative tightness. And I found that there are plenty of similarities between the two fora, but also some very important differences. First of all, the Italian community is mixed gender, while the Anglophone community is just populated by self-declared men. Why I underline self-declare? Because this is a problem for those who study social linguistics. Because if you don't know the actual identity of the speaker online, which is sometimes hide, of course, behind nicknames and stuff, it's really complicated to study discourses from the perspective of gender, because you never know. So in the Anglophone community, basically, nobody checks for the real identity of the users. So you just have to declare to be a man and perform as a man inside the community. In the Italian community, on the contrary, we have a mandatory introduction of the user inside, and given that it mixed gender, women have to share pictures of themselves. So they have to demonstrate that they are real women to discuss as women in the forum. So this was one main differences between the two communities. And of course, it was also source of plenty of research questions to me, like what is the function of women inside the forum, how do they discuss misogyny, if their participation is in a way functional to sustain this set of belief, or if they maybe counteract or make some sort of counter discourse about this in the community. But I will go back to this later. So after that, we checked basically the structure is similar of the two fora. There are some similarities in terms of membership criteria, and there are some similarities that could be compared, especially in terms of structure and affordances, because both fora are divided in a very hierarchical way in sections, in threads, in posts, and whatever. So it was really easy, like, to satisfy at least one of these prerequisites for this corpus to be considered comparable. So we started to collect all this data, and here you can see this, the diagram of the data that I collected with the support of the language technology group in Hamburg, and that's why I say we. So we basically selected just the public sections of these two fora, because we found first that they were comparable in terms of content and in terms of main affordances, and second, because we wanted to avoid, ethical and consideration related to data, and also thinking on the fact that we won't, at a certain point, share this data with the research community. So we started to think also that just publish this data from the public sections of the fora would be a good idea to start. But we collected basically everything. So all the metadata inside, images, multimedia contents in general, link to other external resources, and of course, text. And these are the main statistics of the whole data set. So as you can see, there is a lot here in terms of threads, in terms of posts, in terms of everything, images. So of course, we collected from the very beginning of the two community until March 2023. So it's a very huge data set. So problem starts when you want to look closely at this data, when you want to compare also the topics, when you want to compare discourses. How can you deal with this? Because you saw there are plenty of data, you cannot read manually. So a very common strategy in my field in digital humanities is to apply topic modeling and clustering technique in general, because our corpus is multimodal, so we also wanted to have a look at the multimodal contents, at the images and at pictures, to see also if they were comparable, if there were some sort of circulation of the same meme, of the same contents. So with topic modeling, we was able actually to have a first look at the context and to compare, topics. This is the static clustering of the data, and we performed this clustering just on 20% of the data inside the dataset, because otherwise would be crazy in terms of time of processing, etc. But the most important, in my opinion, findings was looking at the chronological development of the two community. because as I said before, we started to collect this data from the very beginning of the fora, so when they first write the first post inside. And as you can see, there are differences in time. So we collected data from 2009 for the Italian community and from 2017 for the Anglophone community. Why these differences? Because this community, as I said before, was created just after the Reddit group was shut down. So this date is perfectly coherent with this. While the Italian community actually has a sort of progression of topics that is more, chaotic. As you can see, here is very linear. You can discriminate clearly one topic to another. Here is very, up and down. So we found that the community at the very beginning in 2009 was a different community. It was mostly a support community for people discussing their social issue in general, and in particular issues related to their physical aesthetics. So they discussed the fact that they could not be able to find partners because they were considered ugly, etc., etc. And that's also the reason why the name of the forum is Forum dei Brutti, Forum of Ugly People, basically. But at a certain point, around 2014, something changed, as you can see. So what happened in 2014? Maybe someone can answer this question? No? Okay. There was the first mass killing from one of the users of the Anglophone community in the so-called Isla Vista mass attack. So this topic maybe became more prevalent in some groups and also on mainstream media, and the community started to talk about something different. And here you can see there is a progression in terms of, the flow of messages. So also the forum became very active in terms of posts, in terms of threads. Of course, we performed also the clustering on images domain. I won't go too much in detail on this aspect, but you can see there are plenty of continuity between the two clusters. This is the Italian clustering, and left and right. Okay, this is the Italian one, and that is the English one. And of course, we also derive a number of results from this clustering. For instance, we found that memes are not so popular inside these two communities. There are not, the percentage of memes inside is not that high, but actually they are more interested in to share picture of people, especially picture of men and women. And I won't go too much into detail in this aspect, but there is a very understandable reason why they do this, that is related to their practice inside this community. So to summarize some preliminary results of this distant reading on my data. So the Anglophone community over time is more stable, as I said before. The main topics are related to depression, sociality, online and offline social life. So there are also references to dating app, family issues, loneliness, unemployment, masculinity is also another prominent topic inside the Anglophone community, and racism. And what we found interesting is the reference to female family members. So there are a lot of references to mother, to sisters, and so forth and so on. While for the Italian community, there is a shift, as I said, from support community to talking mostly about women and femininity in general. And also another interesting practice inside the community is that they talk a lot about their boundary maintenance. So they are very obsessed with this idea of how to protect this space from people, from outgroups that comes into this community. And they talk a lot, they discuss a lot about this. Okay, but this is not related to discourses, right? It's mostly like to have a look at the content and to see if first they are actually comparable and to see also what they are discussing. If you want to look into discourses and to see how actually they develop their misogynistic discourses, you need something that is more fine-grained. So you need corpus linguistics, because of course we deal with text, with huge text. So it is important here to underline that everything is based on data. There is also some qualitative analysis, but they will come at the very end of this process, because I wanted my research to be data-driven mostly. So the first question was, to what extent the two communities show continuities in terms of ideology and representation, and how can also look at the way these topics in the two communities were actually discussed in these two fora. And I come up with comparative keywords analysis, because of course this is also a data-driven approach. So I could let the data speak for me. And I come up with some related works on comparative approaches to corpora, mostly based on the work of Vesey and Baker, which basically studied English and French Islamist extremist texts, so it was pretty much similar. And from this, I developed, of course, a procedure, because when you deal with keywords analysis, the first thing is to identify comparable corpora and reference corpora. Please interrupt me if you don't get all of these technicalities, because I'm here also to talk about possible interesting methodologies for you to apply to your studies. So the first thing was to identify reference corpora that I could use to perform the keyword analysis, and I apply this to a subset of the whole corpus, because of course I could not analyze the whole data set. Then I extracted the first 500 keywords from both communities, and then I grouped these keywords according to conceptual domains in an inductive process. What does it mean that? That, of course, I had the results of the topic modeling, so I could already have an idea of the contents, and I could actually apply the same structure that I found in the topic modeling to analyze the keywords analysis. But I wanted the data to speak for me. So I went through the words that I extracted to see if I could actually compare, if I could actually triangulate the results obtained with the topic modeling, with the results obtained with the more fine-grained approach with keywords analysis, keywords and concordances analysis. After that, I was able to identify a number of semantic categories, basically assigning each word to a semantic and conceptual domain. And of course here qualitative and close reading helped me a lot to understand and disambiguate sometimes the very complex cryptolect that I found in the two communities. And I was able to derive the most salient themes or discourses inside the two community, as you can see from this graph. So there are already a number of differences in the way they discuss their own themes. So one of the most important differences is that the Anglophone community is mostly concerned with discussing masculinity and hegemonic masculinity, while in the Italian community the focus is more on female social actors. So they discuss a lot about women, the representation of women, and the way they deal with relationship with the opposite sex. So, of course, there is a presence of structural misogyny in both forums, a number of very explicit references to rape and pedophilia, especially in the Anglophone group. Neologism and morphological creativity are in both communities, but I found that they develop this neologism in a very different way, so using very different strategies. There is, of course, an attention to physical appearance and aesthetics in constructing this hierarchy of gender in both communities, especially in the Italian one. Both corpora share the humanizing metaphorical structures. For instance, one of the most important, most prevalent term is void, and we can find there is a correspondence in Italian with a neologism to refer to female social actor that is non-person, NP, non-person. So they have the same meaning. So the Italian community actually appropriate the ideology of the Anglophone community, but reshape or create a new language to share basically the same meaning. And of course, there is a tendency in both communities to reduce women to sexual objects and non-human entities, so to dehumanize, basically, especially women. But there are also differences in the way they discuss this, so in their discourses. So in the Anglophone community, there is more presence of ideological red pill related categories. So they talk more about the black pill and the LMS theory. So it's basically more, it's a more nihilistic way to create this ideology. It is mostly focused on hegemonic masculinities and internal hierarchies of masculinities inside the community. So they basically construct a very sharp idea of what can be considered a dominant male identity. The discourse is also more explicit and violent, And also the vocabulary they use is very specific in terms of the amount of toxicity that they convey with this, using this vocabulary. And the body is framed as mostly structurally determined. So there is a lot of biological determinism inside the English forum. In Italian forum, of course, the first difference is that there are also female active users that I had the possibility to study also, but I won't go too much into detail on this, because the female and male users also have their own characteristics in terms of how they discuss misogyny inside the group. There are more localized and generalized representations, so terms that are related to female social actors are discussed mostly in the context of Italy, so there are less references to xenophobia or stereotypes related to other cultures than Italy. And there is also a great emphasis on regional stereotypes, so internal stereotypes, and especially the North-South divide is a characteristic that is very related to gender in this community. There is a less codified linguistic creativity, so they use most common Italian word to express their opinion and their toxicity. There is a stronger focus on aesthetics than the Anglophone group, but is perceived as something that you can actually modify, that you can actually improve, and it's more performative. While in the Anglophone group, we found that if you have some structural determinant physical characteristic, you cannot change. So it's a more like negative view of the society in general and of identity in particular. And as I said before, there is also greater attention to internal forum governance dynamics. So there are a lot of discussion around ban, around trolls that enter the community, that in a way create some chaos and flame around it. Also because inside the community you can find so-called out groups discussing the same topics. So they not always agree on the fact that there are also female users inside the group. They also have their own way, the Italian community also has its own way to discursively create hierarchy based on gender, but in a very different way in respect to the Anglophone community, to the international community. So they mostly use also here very common linguistic, very common words to express this hierarchy. But there is also inside the Italian community a hierarchy based mostly on the aesthetics of people, both for female and for male. Of course, all this discourse is very binary and heterosexual because the communities are very binary in their view of gender and sexuality. And finally, I'm going to the conclusion. The fourth methodology I applied to study in a more fine-grained way was to look at the gendered keywords and social actors, especially in the Italian community, because as I said before, they reuse some strategies, so some words are shared, some tropes are traveling from the international community into the Italian community, but actually, as you can see, they are not the same. So they have their own strategies to address female social actors and to create this idea of femininity. And by analyzing in comparison these two lists, I was also able to find a number of similarities and differences, because of course all my research is around similarities and differences between the discourse of these two communities. So there is an existence of a common core of sexist and misogynist lexical items, which are very common in our languages, I'd say universally. But both communities show a high level of toxicity also in addressing, especially in addressing, in targeting women. There are a lot of Anglicism and neologism in the Italian forum. So the Italian corpus contain actually a smaller number of slang terms, so the cryptolect is not that defined. But still you can find some mainstream tropes inside the community that are listed here. There are different social linguistics profiles, so the incel forum primarily employ community-specific slang. There are also terms that are different in terms of morphology, of course, but that convey more or less the same meaning. So they can be considered a translation or an adaptation from the international community to the Italian one. And of course, there are a lot of process of nominalization, resemantization, and metaphorical dehumanization, also in the lexical choices of the Italian community. Another strategy I used, especially, this is a very short case study, but I wanted to see if actually these two terms could be compared, because they are used mostly with the same function. So I wanted to check in discourse if they are actually constructed in the same way. And basically, in the English corpus, I found that there are there is a higher number of modifiers, so more extensive and varied lexical surrounding the term void. So basically, women are discussed in a more complex way, let's say. But in the Italian corpus, we found there are few modifiers of this word, meaning that suggesting that there is a more focus on a very narrow representation of women, of female social actors. Especially because the vocabulary in Italian is very simple and dichotomous. So we find, for instance, modifiers that are very simple in a way to describe women. So they are described mostly for their physical appearance, like bello versus brutto, alto versus basso, and so forth and so on. So it's a very creating this very simple image of women. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. I hope that this was interesting for you, even if it's a very huge topic, and it's very complicated to enter into the complicated details of the ideology of this ecosystem, of this community. But I hope it was interesting, at least from the methodological side, because I combined, as I tried to explain you, I combined very different methodologies to to my data to try to be more as much reliable as possible with my findings. Any questions?
Let's open up the floor for questions.
Yes.
Okay, I have several,
Okay.
but very impressive presentations. So thank you for that. I would like to ask you first about the topic modeling. How did you perform the topic modeling, and especially when it comes to images? And then, of course, you perform these different methodological approaches. Lately, I was listening and also reading some of the presentations on problematics of topic modelings when it comes especially to the attitudes and emotions. So because it's topic modeling, and then you can lose all these very important parts of the discourse that are interested in this kind of studies. So I would like to ask you, did you also found something like methodologically interesting when you compare this distant and close reading?
Yes, of course. I mean, this is the main reason why I decided to apply different methodologies in my research. Because, of course, I could also choose just to look at my data in a very distant reading, like just using topic modeling and then derive my own, interpretation of the findings. Of course, these results are, I consider these findings better than the way topic modeling is usually applied, because I was able to use BERT models. There are basically this large language representation based on a very huge data set. So they are trained on a very huge, broad sample of each language. So I think my results are at least interesting in terms of the way this model can discriminate the meaning of each word, because these models are not based on the so-called representation of text as a box of words, but they have at least an idea of the context, at least an idea of patterns of semantic patterns, but also syntactic patterns. So it is more precise in that sense. But of course, there are plenty of papers, and there is a lot of literature about the fact that topic modeling alone is not effective as a methodology, especially if you want to study discourses. So I don't know if I answered your question, but topic modeling is useful if you want to just enter the content of the data set, and if you want to explore, okay, what's this corpus about? What's inside there? What I can find there? But it's not, of course, that effective if you want to study in a more fine-grained, something that is more complex as ideology, for instance.
Was it useful also for images? Because if
yes,
if you have images that are just
it was also useful in terms of the chronological representation, because I found a lot of useful insights looking at the topic over time. But actually, for the clusters of images, we didn't perform topic modeling, because, of course, topic modeling, you can do a multimodal topic modeling, but it's mostly based on the same technique, which is clustering. Basically, also the topic modeling is based on clustering. It's just the mathematics is maybe more complex and more articulated, but the whole idea is to basically put together all the elements that are similar, that share some similarities, and that can be aggregated in a way to look at macro pattern in your data. So we performed this clustering based on visual machine learning. There are a couple of tools that you can use that are easy to use also for those who are not so skilled in computer science, but we use mostly machine learning to do this, basically.
And then I have a more personal question. I think that the research community should talk more about it. It's about your personal feelings when you address these courses that are toxic and full of hate speech, how you deal with it, because it's important. And we still pretend that we are doing something neutral and I don't know what, and we don't speak about it. It's the same as the interpreters didn't speak about it for when they had to perform interpreting with atrocities, for example, and then this huge change came with the International Court for Rwanda when they started to talk how important it is also that we as a community address this question. And I would like just to ask you, how did you feel when you did this, and if you have a kind of a position about this?
Well, this is a very important question. I'd say that to me, I didn't really realize at the very beginning of this, like after 2 years working on this data, I didn't even realize that it affected me in terms of psychological distress. Because at the very beginning you have this very confident, idea of doing research. I mean, you can resist everything because everything is interesting, and of course it is interesting in a way. Sometimes it was also fun because you can find a lot of weird stuff inside. But I have to say, after almost 4 years now, I'm just sick of it. And I would really appreciate it if I could study this with the support of someone else. Because most of the time we do research alone. Especially for those coming from the humanities, for us is like research is something more private. It's me deal with my books, with my everything. So it helped me a lot to be in the language technology group in Hamburg, because there I felt I was part of a community actually, working with computer scientists. They usually write together, they usually develop their own idea in a team, because of course you cannot do this all on your own. It's of course a huge work to do for just a person there. So yes, we should learn at least a lesson from computer scientists, and is to be more open to people that are actually studying something that is similar, at least. So yes, this was my experience. I don't know if you share the same concern.
Because I know some of the colleagues that were working on hate speech and they couldn't do it anymore at one point, and they needed at least a break.
Yeah. I mean, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to travel a lot and to spend some time with my colleagues, with other people. But I think it would have been different if I stayed, for instance, just in Genoa, studying just in Genoa. So yes.
Any other questions from the room?
Yes.
Hi, thank you for the very interesting lecture. Okay. I was just curious about one little sentence. It was a short sentence that I saw on one of the slides, and it mentioned differences between the south and north Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, does it have anything to do, maybe I'm wrong, because the first idea I got is that it has also to do with class differences. And I was wondering how, if you by any chance, I know you were researching other things, but how perhaps, and if class is also somehow visible as a concept or as a problem or anything like that. And what did you mean with the north and south Italy?
Thank you for your question. Of course, it's related to society in general, and of course also to class. I mean, I wouldn't say that the problem, that the stereotypes around South and North Italy is just based on some economical divide or some classes divide. But it's very embedded in our culture in general in Italy. It's very embedded, especially in the way we conceive gender role, because there is this very common and powerful representation of, for instance, women from the north being more independent, being stronger, etc., while in the south, women are considered more traditional, more relegated to their classical and stereotypical social role. So yes, there is a lot also, like, in outside of the dichotomy between south and north, there are a lot of discussions about social class, because of course it can affect also our relationships in a way. At least for users of this community, social class, it's an important part of the way they are able to enter in the society and to be able to construct a relationship with others. So the more you are rich, the better it is, of course. So I don't know if it's maybe both combined, like both discourses have the same roots in a way. But I would say that for Italy, it's very it's a long-standing idea of the South being, underdeveloped and less open-minded, more traditional. So I don't know if I answered your question, but yes, there is, of course, a connection with class.
But comparatively with the Anglophone community?
Comparatively with the Anglophone community and the international community in general, of course, it's more multicultural. So we can compare the two. The discourses are similar because in the Anglophone community, they discuss more about issues related to white supremacism, for instance. But I didn't have the chance actually to precisely look in detail into this. I have, that feeling that the discourses could be compared, and it would be really interesting to look at it maybe in future works. But my impression is there is a common core of stereotypes. Yes, it is compared.
Any other questions from the room? Yep. Yeah.
Maybe a small follow-up question, and thank you once again. This is fantastic work, and I know there's massive work behind this nice and neat presentation. I was wondering to what extent you observe a sense of Italianness in the group as it stands, both in their identifications, and you mentioned their morphological strategies that appear quite different from the Anglophone ones. I know there is just a little bit of research on incel communities in other languages, and they often tend to really copy and reproduce all that Anglophone vocabulary and terminology. And here it seems to be a lot more creative.
Mhm.
So I wonder if that contributes to a more coherent Italian incel in-group feeling in any sense or not. And then perhaps a second question relatedly, to what extent is this category of incel at all known in the wider Italian context? I mean, in English it's become something of a label that we use for people saying, oh, he's a total incel. To what extent is this being mainstreamed in the Italian context as well?
Sorry if thank you for the questions. I don't know if I really get the first one. So are you asking me the differences in the creativity of their cryptolect or?
Yes,
Okay.
and as part of whether you observe that to be a more coherent Italian
Idea of
rounded community.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's very localized in terms of the way they conceive, especially gender. They discuss, as I said before, they discuss women mostly on the Italian context. There are also references to other ethnicities or other nationalities in general, but they are, I mean, quantitatively fewer compared to how do they discuss women in Italy, and the fact that they have this very hard time to deal with women in Italy because, you know, in Italy women are the most common stereotype is that Italian women are pretentious, so they want always more. They want a man with power, a man with money, a man with whatever. So yes, it is very Italian centric, I'd say. They sometimes discuss themes related to international politics, but in a very, I mean, in lesser extent, I would say. Any specific section of the forum that is not that is less used, like in a very small section of the forum where usually users don't write that much there. So going to the second question that was about the mainstream is, of course, well, I'd say there are two different trends now. So in the academia, still there are few studies on the Italian community. There are mostly sociological studies about it, but they most of the time are a sort of repetition of what have been said in the Anglophone community. And this was a very, it was very complicated to me to start to study discourses without having zero literature. So, of course, especially when you deal with the huge amount of data, sometimes you feel lost inside this, ocean of possible research questions. But on the other side, so this is for the academic domain. It's mostly qualitative, it's mostly a copy-paste of other international publications, unfortunately. But it's becoming mainstream in the media recently, it started 3 months ago, maybe less, 2 months ago, but the media, newspapers, and also a lot of Instagram influencers are talking about the incels and the manosphere for two main reasons. The first one is because we have a problem with violence against women in Italy, and we have a problem to accept the fact that we have this problem, to recognize that there is a problem with this. And there have been plenty of feminicides in the last 2 years, especially from very young people. So there is a combination of this attention, mediatic attention to feminicides in general, that is becoming a topic, a huge topic. And the second fact is more, entertainment because of the Netflix adolescent series that, of course, gain a lot of attention also in the Italian context. And combined together, now we all discuss about incels in Italy, finally.
We had another question.
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to kind of return to the question about North-South that Sasha already raised before. So I was wondering, what kind of value judgments do you encounter about the North or the South within the community? Are there some kind of practical examples of what people usually say, or how do they assess, I don't know, being from the North or being from the South? Is there some kind of dynamic here which can be detected?
Absolutely. Starting from their cryptolect, because they actually created neologism around this stereotype. For instance, they use the word terron face to indicate people that look stereotypically like people coming from the south of Italy. So, yes, there are plenty of examples that can be discussed here. But I think that everything is really oriented to aesthetics. So most of these stereotypes are related to the way actually people appear. So, for instance, if you have dark hair or brown eyes and so forth and so on, you are described as a terron face something. So it's very oriented to the physicality of the body of a person. And of course, they discuss also, as I said before, stereotypical gender roles associated to these perceived differences between the South and the North. So, yes. Unfortunately, I don't have example here, but I mean.
Thank you very much for this talk. I have a question. Related to the publicness of the data. So you mentioned that you only collected and you only work on data that is publicly available. And I wanted to clarify whether these fora are public themselves or there's just the public side of them that you could access. And I also wanted to ask whether you have still nevertheless tried, maybe for your own kind of not curiosity is not the right word. Have you tried to go into the not public fora and whether you saw any difference that is kind of visible from just qualitative research between the public and the non-public parts of this forum? And whether you could imagine some sort of comparative study at some point of these two studies?
Mm-hmm. No, thank you for the question. It is especially the second one, because it was one of my concerns at the very beginning. Because, of course, what I analyzed is just the surface of all of this. I choose to not subscribe to both fora. I choose to detach myself as much as possible from the community. So I visited actually the communities just a few times. I do not enter the community, like the fora, because I don't want to feed, the views they have. I don't want to also, in a way, I prefer to protect myself as much as possible as a researcher and as a woman doing research on this community. But I think that also on that level, they are pretty much comparable, in the sense that I imagine, because you can at least read the title of these sections. So they are mostly related to pornography. They are mostly related to discussing their own sexual preferences, I would say. And there is, in the Italian forum, there is also a section that is dedicated to picture of users. Because as I said in the beginning, if you are a woman, you have to be verified as a woman in real life in the Italian community. So, of course, if you share your face in a public section, everybody can, recognize you in the forum. So they create basically a section that is private, where they share their own pictures. Also because one of the practice of the community is to aesthetically evaluate each other in a scale from 1 to 10, etc., etc. So yes, I think they are pretty much comparable, even if I didn't have the chance to enter into this, because you have to subscribe to look into these private sections, and I didn't want to. But to answer your first question related to data, so far you can ask for this data because we created a form, so you can compile this form and you can ask for my colleagues in Hamburg to share at least a part of the data for research purpose only. I wanted to find a way to publish this data for the research community, but I think that so far it's very complicated because there are a number of constraints about sharing this kind of data. First of all, these data are not can be considered private because these fora are not like social media platforms. When you have a precise policy, when you have precise rule, etc., they pertain to someone. There is someone who actually registrate the domain and so forth and so on. So it's, legally speaking, it's more complicated to publish this data. But it's my wish. Like at a certain point, I will probably find a way. We also anonymize part of the data, but actually we found that this is not enough to publish this data. Yes, you are shaking your head. I know. We discussed about it. So yes, let's see. So far you can ask. If you are interested in to look at this data, you can ask to the language technology group.
We had a question on Zoom with a very lengthy preface from Jana. The nucleus is...
Jana?
Yes, Jana Javori. The nucleus is if you see how your study could contribute to policy formation regarding the prevention/countering of violent extremism. For example, the development of risk assessment tools.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to be useful in this society. So, of course, this was also one of the main reasons why I decided to study misogyny in a cross-linguistics manner. because I found there are not so many resources in Italian, at least to study misogyny, linguistic misogyny, or discursive misogyny. So, of course, if I can give some contribution to at least have a more, let's say, layered idea of what's inside this forum, would be great.
Good. Just one question from my side,
Okay.
maybe to wrap up before going to the coffee break you are also kindly invited to. Due to time constraints, I feel you haven't touched upon for me, one of the most interesting aspects of your research, and it's a feature of the Italian corpus, which means that female users engage in discourse. So maybe if you could expand a bit on how they do this, what ideas they propagate, how they interact.
You are opening the Pandora's box. I mean, in terms of practices and in terms of discourses, I saw there are plenty of differences. I specifically looked at the way they use modality to legitimate their discourses inside the fora. So there is one huge difference on that side. So just to be brief, because it's very huge, basically women inside the forum are functional to sustain and to check the validity of the male user's opinion. And they offer also themselves as in-groups to give suggestions on how to behave with other women. So they are considered sort of expert domain inside the forum. So they have this principal functionality, let's say. But they are also target of hate inside the forum. So they are considered reliable just if they perform as opinion leaders or as support to actually validate the discourses inside the fora. But they are also outgroups in a way. So there is this very divisive also topic inside the Italian community, because not all the users actually are happy with the fact that they are sharing the same space with women. And it is, of course, just a little part of what I found looking at their discourses, but there are plenty of other topics to discuss related to this.
Thank you. So we can continue discussing all these topics at the coffee break. Thank you so much, Selenia, for your talk. And
Thank you for attending and for all the questions.